Good day, everybody. My name is Dr. Mary Clasquin-Johnson, and I like students to just call me Mary. So in this presentation for ETH302S, I'll be focusing on theme B, which focuses on barriers to learning. So we would require you to have a very good understanding of what barriers to learning are. In this module, we're very careful about the terminology that we use, how we describe and define barriers to learning is a very important aspect that we want you to reflect on, because the definitions, the terminology, the way in which we frame the challenges that many of our learners encounter has direct influence on how we work with those learners, how we sometimes even discriminate against learners and stigmatize them. So we want you to reflect on the words that you use when you discuss learners, for example, in assessment reports, how you communicate with your colleagues, how you communicate with parents is all very much influenced by your framing of barriers to learning. Remember, we're working in a social inclusion and social justice paradigm. So how we describe, define, and understand the challenges learners encounter is incredibly important. Okay, so in this module, we define barriers as obstacles that negatively affect learning and development of our learners. These obstacles are something that we really need to take very seriously, because it's our responsibilities as teachers, firstly, to prevent barriers from arising in the first place, but where they exist, to identify them, to address them, to reduce them, and ideally to eradicate barriers to learning. And we do this through the provision of appropriate, tailor-made, individualized support that really recognizes the individuality of every learner. So we respond to the learner's individual needs. Now, Dr. Ledwaba emphasized that our curriculum needs to be flexible. We differentiate it. Here, we're thinking very much about our differentiation and our interventions and our learning support as focusing on the individual learner's barriers or obstacles to learning. So the first thing that we want you to understand is that we don't just accept barriers, we do not ignore barriers, we recognize them, and we work to address them, to overcome them, to reduce them, or to minimize them. These obstacles exist, but we can reduce them. So you need to believe that as a teacher, this is your responsibility. And so in this module, we provide guidance for you to really know what are the factors that cause barriers to learning. Some of these factors might be environmental. Some of these factors might relate to our attitudes as teachers. Some of these factors might relate to our social and economic circumstances. Some of these barriers might be internal to the learner. And so we need to differentiate between internal, what we call the intrinsic barrier, and external barriers, which are external barriers. And we need to understand that learners very frequently will not be able to control either the internal or the external barriers. It's our task as teachers to focus on the learner's internal and or external barriers. And this will vary because we have very diverse learners in our classrooms. Right. So, as I've already said, and I emphasize once again, it is crucial that as a teacher, we know every individual learner very well, that we understand the individual learner's uniqueness. They will have strengths, they will have very specific interests, and they will have very individualized support needs. Now, every classroom is a diverse learning situation. Every year, your classroom will have a new group of learners, and every group of learners will have their own diverse characteristics, because the learners from one year to the next are a different group of learners. They come with their own backgrounds, their own linguistic and cultural and developmental profiles. So we need to understand every individual within the group of the class. Okay. Now, as teachers, we need to recognize what contributes towards this diversity. And as I've already said, it's all these characteristics: the cultural, the linguistic, the socio-economic, religious, developmental profiles, the family backgrounds, who the parents are, where these children live, the circumstances of the family. It's all extremely diverse. But within that group of learners, we need to get to know every individual learner. And this is something that we have to take the time and make the effort to understand the individual learner. We've got a whole year with them in our classrooms, and you really need to be able to connect with an individual. So the learners come with prior knowledge, and this prior knowledge is also diverse, and they also have very, very diverse support needs. Now, when we think about the implementation of inclusive education, it will relate to how we plan, how we teach, and how we assess an individual learner within the context of our classrooms. And so this is sophisticated and complex teaching. This is the heart of effective quality education, our ability to plan, teach, and assess every individual learner effectively. Now, in the next section of your study guide that focuses on theme B, barriers to learning, we have given you a set of key points. There's 10 key points that we highlight regarding learners who experience learning difficulties or obstacles or barriers to learning. So please pay special attention to pages 29 and 30 in your study guide. The next section of our theme B deals with how barriers to learning prevent quality education. Remember now, the whole purpose of inclusive education is to ensure that every learner has access to quality education in order to achieve their full potential as a learner, to really receive the support that they require. And so we can evaluate what we do. We can look at whether every learner has the equal opportunities for quality education through whether they have access to education. And access is more than physical presence, because you can be physically present in the classroom, but if you do not understand the language of learning and teaching, you can't fully access your right to quality education. If learners are physically present, but they cannot communicate with the teacher because the teacher is unable to use sign language or other language or communication strategies to enable them to access the curriculum, then your learners' right to quality education opportunities has not fully been realized. The next requirement is participation. So we look at our group and we ask ourselves as teachers, how do I know, is every learner participating actively? Is every learner participating meaningfully? What the one learner needs to be able to participate will not be the same as what the next learner needs. Some learners might need accommodations to that curriculum. The principle of the curriculum, as Dr. Ledwaba highlighted for you, is flexibility. And so we need to maximize the support to the learners by the accommodations or differentiations that we plan and implement. And the purpose is to ensure participation. So you'll look at the group of learners and you will assess, is everybody participating? But participation must result in achievement. Every learner must experience success. Every learner must be progressing according to the official curriculum. And for every grade, we have the assessment requirements. Our CAPS provides a curriculum and assessment policy statement. So we look at our outcomes for each term of the school year and at the end of the grade. And we need to ensure that every learner with the appropriate support through our differentiated curriculum has achieved their potential and has achieved the outcomes that are specified by CAPS. Now, unless all these requirements have been met through how we plan, teach, and assess, we will not have inclusive education. Please remember this. Assess your own practice on the basis of these three requirements. So we need you to think carefully about what constitutes internal or intrinsic barriers and what are the factors that constitute external or extrinsic barriers. On the left side of the screen, you will note that the internal barriers are factors within the learners, and this may include birth defects, physical impairments, neurological disorders, sensory impairments, medical conditions, intellectual impairment, attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and emotional issues. And all here you'll see it's a very medical framing, but these are real conditions that need to be diagnosed. We need to identify and understand how these factors really constitute barriers, because they are obstacles that prevent effective learning. And therefore, these conditions and factors need to be taken into consideration, and we plan on the basis of minimizing the negative influence on education. Then on the right side of your screen, you'll see the factors that are external or outside the learner. And these factors are in two groups. It's within the family or within the socioeconomic context that the learners are are living. So family factors are important because the family has the role as the primary educational institution. So the parents of the child or the primary caregivers are they're the child's first teachers, and the home remains an educational context because we are teaching our children all kinds of knowledge and skills, and we are modeling appropriate behavior for our children. So the family is the primary educational institution, not just the school. And the school and the family must work together, but the school needs to understand the family and the family circumstances. And so also, the things that we might overlook, like families, child rearing styles, whether parents are involved. We've got different approaches to parenting. Some are laissez-faire and they allow children to do as they please. Some might be very autocratic and controlling, and then children feel that they need to, resist and challenge that authority if it's too excessive. And so we also have, very unfortunate circumstances that are leading to the disintegration of family life and socioeconomic challenges that are really out of the child's control, but they influence the family and the child's circumstances. And here we recognize factors such as poverty, unemployment, HIV and AIDS, which is leading to, a whole range of social consequences, such as child-headed households and children growing up without parents. And so we need to be mindful of how these external barriers influence how children in these contexts learn. And then also factors such as crime and the deterioration of value systems. Now, at the moment, the one massive external barrier that is confronting our schools is the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we can add all the factors associated with the pandemic as a huge external barrier right now. Okay, so I want to draw your attention to activities 9 to 12 in your study guide. Please take these activities seriously. They're very important. We're not just focusing on assessment in this module. What we are trying to promote is for you to feel more prepared to respond appropriately and effectively to the diverse needs of your learners as a teacher. So this goes way beyond the examination. We want you to think deeply about the kinds of practices that are required to implement inclusion effectively, okay? And how we ensure that every learner's right to quality education is actually realized. So we ask you to reflect on this module. We cannot prepare you for every possible scenario. And so through this module and the approach we've taken, we aim to prepare your hearts, your heads, and your hands. And by this we mean your beliefs and attitudes about children who experience barriers to learning. And as you've seen, barriers to learning are an enormous consideration for teachers because they can be very, very extensive. There are very many different kinds of barriers to learning. And the next aspect is then your knowledge and your understanding of how to provide quality education in your classroom and meet the needs of every individual learner entrusted to your care. And then your hands relate to your skills as a teacher. We do not have a recipe book that you can follow, but we hope that we've given you some basic awareness and some basic knowledge to put you on the path to being creative and innovative and really thinking deeply every day about how you meet the needs of your learners through practical strategies such as curriculum differentiation. And so by this, we really mean that teachers need to be lifelong learners and to continuously learn and extend their knowledge and skills related to inclusive education. If you have any questions or comments, please contact us. And in the last slide, we've once again reminded you of our contact details. Thank you for watching this video and good luck.